Hello everyone, to all our scholars and also everyone who is joining in and watching our YouTube live. So we at the Strivers Network are really honored to have with us today Mr. Brendan Bond, who is the Associate Director of International Admissions at the University of Rochester. And Thank you so much, Mr. Bond, for taking time off this morning to come and join us and speak to our scholars about the holistic admissions process practiced by US universities. So without further ado, I will hand the time over to Mr. Bond to begin. And just so everybody knows, scholars, please feel free to leave your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so you can ask your questions then and send them in the chat. And to everyone watching on YouTube, you can leave your questions in the live chat and the comments as well. Thank you so much for coming today. And Mr. Bond, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Tharandi, and thank you for the Strivers Network for hosting this session today. Really happy to be here and connecting with students abroad. So as was introduced, my name is Brendan Bond. I'm an Associate Director of International Admissions here at the University of Rochester. I've been involved in international higher education and international admissions and recruitment for over a decade, and with specific responsibility for most of those years in South Asia. So it's always great to chat with students from the region. But so today, what I'm going to be talking about is the process of review that the majority of selected US universities use in reviewing applicants, both in regard to international applicants as well as those based in the United States. Holistic admissions. It's probably something you've definitely heard of if you've started to explore options in regards to applications in the United States. What is holistic admissions? And I'll talk a little bit about the context of what holistic admissions is, how to stand out in the holistic admissions process, and bringing some context how here at the University of Rochester, we utilize holistic admissions in our process. So as an international student potentially applying to US institutions, this is going to be crucial to understand, as the information that I talk about today, firstly, is going to illustrate how application review will work differently in the United States compared to your home country's university admissions process, which is, of course, important to know. You don't want to assume that all higher education institutions admit students via the same method. But also in understanding this information, it will help you better approach your own individual application, because as you'll become aware in our conversation today, there's inherent subjectivity that's brought to the practice of holistic admissions, both in terms of how the university approaches your application, but also in terms of how you present yourself within the application itself. So just now it's a month ago, I was at the IC3 conference in Hyderabad, India, and many sessions were discussing equitable testing, universities going test optional, how that's affecting admissions processes in the United States, and of course the confusion around that. And so holistic admissions was a constant theme as part of that conversation. And so I think it's really important for international applicants to the United States to understand holistic admissions, because it's a real fundamental part of the philosophy of higher education at US universities. And like I said, the vast majority of institutions in the United States, selective institutions that you're going to be looking to apply to, are going to practice holistic admissions. So what is holistic admissions? Just kind of a brief general introduction. In its basic form, holistic admissions is a strategy or a review philosophy designed to help institutions assess the preparedness and fit of an applicant based on a broad range of factors, rather than just one set of metrics or one set of test scores. And so in its best execution, holistic admissions can create a more equitable system for evaluating potential students, because holistic admissions is a process where universities strive to evaluate the entire student on a broad range of factors in making admissions decisions, assessing an applicant's unique experiences alongside, more traditional measures of academic preparedness. We essentially, as a University of Rochester or whatever university, we want to know the whole you. And this is important because we're not just admitting you to keep your nose in a book for 4 years, we're admitting you to our university community. And, fit and those themes are going to be a pretty constant present throughout our conversation today. So in discussing the whole you and what is going to be required as part of the application review process at a university that practices holistic admissions, does this all really matter? Do all these elements of an application matter in review? And really the short answer is yes. While most universities who practice holistic admission will weigh these aspects of an application differently, obviously an Institute of Technology may look more closely at your math SAT results, or your scores in physics, or your GPA results in those courses. But universities who state holistic admissions as part of the application review are looking at everything you submit to get a complete picture, as complete a picture of the candidate as possible. And this is a philosophy of review, the way in which we approach review, that I think most would agree favorably brings context into admissions decisions, allowing not only a student to put their best selves forward. Life is complex and an application should allow for that complexity. But importantly, it also allows universities a level of subjectivity outside of you, the applicant, just being a test score or a GPA. So essentially, yes, it all does matter. I know that's kind of something that's hard to hang on to, because you may be coming from an educational system where you have to meet certain minimum benchmarks to gain entry or pass a course, etc. In the United States, that's a part of the process, but it's much more of a broader approach to admissions review. So I'm going to go through these elements here, so you'll hopefully get a little bit more of a sense of the basic requirements of an application to a U.S. university, but also how a U.S. university who practices holistic admissions review may look at these elements in the context of your whole application. So firstly, transcripts, your grades, your GPA, it's not just final GPA, but it's your curriculum rigor. What is the curriculum you're pursuing? Is it a CBSE curriculum? Is it an IBDP curriculum? Is it Sri Lankan A levels? Is it a national curriculum? Is it Cambridge? All of these different curriculums present the framework one within an admissions officer is going to evaluate your academic profile. Also understanding the context of that high school. Does the high school you attend offer rigorous curriculum? Not all high schools do, and it's our job as admissions representatives to understand the schools that our students are applying from, so we can apply that context to the courses that may be available to that student. Not every student is going to have access to an IB program or to A levels. And so we don't want to discount that student because they may not have access to higher level rigor in curriculum compared to another student. So that's the context that I'm talking about that's really important. What are you doing within your framework of curriculum to maximize your rigor, to maximize your educational opportunities? So again, you can see here, it's not just a final GPA, it's all these other factors, in addition to kind of the performance over your last 4 years of high school. So I know there was a question that was sent to me earlier about which grades to submit. So you want to submit your last 4 years of high school. So for example, if you're pursuing A levels, that means 10, 11, 12, and sixth form, or grade 13, okay? That's what we're going to be looking at. And it's not just final grades, it's kind of the trajectory that you're making over the 4 years of your the final 4 years of your secondary school career. Next, looking at testing. You want to be aware of your prospective university's testing policy when it comes to the SAT and the ACT. So many universities in the United States have gone test optional because of the COVID pandemic. And institutions may have been test optional prior to that. So what is your university's requirement regarding submitting testing? And of course, if they are test optional, what is important to consider in whether or not to submit those scores? Does a university super score? Do they look at the SAT versus the ACT differently? Understanding how your interested university or institution requires and how they use these within the context of their holistic review is really important, because not every university is going to approach testing the same. And so it's really important that you're in touch with your university that you're interested in to understand the requirements in regards to testing, SAT, ACT, English language testing, and how potentially being test optional may allow you a certain level, or will allow you a certain level of freedom and flexibility of whether or not to submit those scores. Then looking at letters of recommendation. So basically, a letter of recommendation is a testimonial that brings truth to your ability and statements in the application. So each university is going to require different different number of letters of recommendation. Some may allow non-academic recommenders or academic recommenders. So you just again want to be aware of what your university is requiring in terms of letters of recommendation. And here at the University of Rochester, we require 2 letters of recommendation. Both being from academic sources, meaning a teacher or a counselor, and that you can submit a third letter, but more than that really would distract from the application. Again, letters of recommendation, you're making statements of your academic quality and experiences in your application, and letters of recommendation bring validity, testimonial to the claims that you're making in your application, essentially. So that's what a letter of recommendation is. Looking at the essays that are required as part of the application process, the Common App College essay, or a letter of intent, perhaps supplemental short answer essays that you may need to be required. All of these different essays can be part of the application process. And in a holistically reviewed application, these are opportunities to speak directly to an admissions representative. These essays allow you to further bring context to your situation, opportunity to address current events as they affect you, demonstrate interest in a university, maybe talking about how your own academic goals align with the university's academic opportunities. So essays are really good opportunities to bring that context to your application that is so important in an application that's holistically reviewed. So in terms of extracurricular activities, things that are going on outside of the classroom, a big part of the conversation that goes surrounding applications to U.S. universities is what are extracurricular activities, but what are good extracurricular activities? How to build that list. And what's important here relative to holistic admissions is that context is really important. What are you able to do in your particular situation and what your particular high school values or offers? Obviously, if you have to help support your family and you have a job, that's going to limit the opportunities that you have to do extracurricular activities. Or perhaps you go to a high school or a school where those opportunities are just not offered. And so that context is important. And so that's something as admissions officers that we appreciate and we look at. But generally speaking, we're looking at what you do outside of the classroom that demonstrates good character, being well-rounded, academic excellence, or interests as they relate to what you want to study at university, or interests that just show that, hey, I'm not just a person that's studying all the time. Again, we're admitting you to our community as institutions, not just to an academic classroom. So another thing I would like to talk about in reference to essays and letters of recommendation uh, is how they apply to demonstrating the research and understanding of a university that you've made. So this is demonstrated interest. So what is demonstrated interest? So this is an aspect of applicant review in holistic admissions that can be unique to U.S. University Review. Essentially, demonstrated interest is your desire to be at a particular institution. And this is not going to show up in an SAT score, but through the organic familiarity that you have with an institution that you establish throughout your own application. So what are you doing in your application that shows that, hey, I know the University of Rochester. I'm familiar with the University of Rochester. I'm not just applying to Rochester because, hey, it was on a list and I'm clicking that box. Are you highlighting a particular professor who you want to work with in a statement of intent, or an extracurricular activity that reflects a university's core mission statement? These are ways of showing an understanding of a university, and this demonstrated interest can be an important uh, factor in admissions decisions for some institutions. After all, universities, we want to admit students that want to be at our institutions, right? And so gauging that demonstrated interest is an important part of the process. And lastly, of course, essays, these activities, they highlight, personal characteristics, what makes your situation unique or remarkable, family situations, challenges overcome, what you're doing beyond academics that's going to influence your particular situation. So these extracurricular activities and essays allow you the space to bring in these topics. Also want to mention interviews as part of what may be required as part of the application process, and it's an important part of applications that are holistically reviewed. So these are opportunities to speak one-on-one with an admissions representative. It's a real fantastic opportunity to bring further context and personalization to your application. A face with a name is always important in this process, allowing you to highlight other opportunities that you've had, and of course, an opportunity to ask questions directly of the admissions office. And that's a big piece of advice that I can give. Us in as admissions representatives, we're going to be that chief conduit, the voice that has the most authority in describing how we process and review applications at our institutions. So you want to be familiar with us. You want to be asking questions so you understand that process. So all of these elements, you apply on the common application, you apply to 5 different universities in the United States, and they may ask for all of these different elements of a complete application, but all of those 5 different institutions may look at these elements a little bit differently to best judge fit academic preparedness within their university. And so why do institutions practice holistic admissions? Why is this unique way of looking at admissions important, and something that I think really stands out about U.S. universities? First and foremost, again, holistic admissions allows a level of subjectivity in the application review process that allows universities to meet institutional priorities. And so institutional priorities are not always academic in nature. And what are institutional priorities? They're priorities that an institution has in building that first year class. And those aren't, again, always academic in nature. For example, we may want to build underrepresented populations, underrepresented majors, perhaps there's athletic programs, talent-based programs. These are all subjective qualities that not only have to do with academic talent, but personal character, demographics, financial resources, preparation, aspects of an applicant that are not wholly representative in a transcript alone, but are really important to the process that we have in building a first year class as a university. And that's kind of the more pragmatic part of this process. Here at the University of Rochester, for example, we're looking to build a first year incoming class of approximately 1,500 students. We'll have 2,000, or I'm sorry, we'll have 20,000 applications. And so obviously every institution's priority at some level is to build the most academically talented class from that pool of applicants. But most universities are looking to meet a variety of targets when shaping an admitted class through the admissions process. And if you think about it, most applicants to the United States from abroad are applying to maybe 5% of the total universities here in the United States, keeping in mind that, most students are going to apply to the top 200 institutions here in the US, universities and liberal arts colleges. But there's over 4,500 institutions of higher education in the United States. So, selectivity is an important process. The majority of those applicants are academically competitive. So the university has to find another way to distinguish between applicants that's not just academic, that's not just based on the transcript alone. Again, we're not just admitting you to a major or a program, we're admitting you to our community. And we all have a unique campus environment, a unique community makeup, a style of education, philosophy of education. And so we use holistic admissions to make sure students are not only academically suitable for our institutions, but in a general fit are good fits for our institutions. After all, we want you to not just survive here at the University of Rochester or wherever you're applying. We want to make sure that you're thriving here at our institutions. And so in using holistic admissions, we can best identify the students that will show the greatest potential to succeed at our particular schools. So that's chiefly why universities will use holistic admissions. And so how to stand out in this process where everything matters and we're looking at all these different elements, how do you as an applicant best approach this situation of review in the United States with holistic admissions to stand out, to allow yourself the best opportunity to be admitted to your institution? And the quick answer is to be yourself. And, of course, in reality, that's easier said than done, right? In a 20-page application. But I think it's really important to keep in mind, you have an opportunity in the common application or in the coalition application or whatever application you're submitting to your particular school to really shape your profile in that application. After all, while there are requirements that all schools will ask for, there is significant control that is given to you, the applicant, in what essays you choose to address, what activities you choose to include in a resume, who's going to write your letters of recommendation, etc. All of this is going to shape the picture that you are painting of yourself in a holistically reviewed application. And so this is a real benefit to you as the applicant to put your best self forward in the application. So how do you stand out in this process when you really do have some control in shaping that application? So, obviously, sharing insight into who you are, what interests you. Don't try to be what you think the university wants you to be. Be yourself again. Universities admit students for a variety of different reasons, and it may not be what you think their goals are. Show the way you think. Show, don't tell when you write. That's a great way in which it's a great piece of advice when it comes to essays. Reflecting on your experiences rather than listing them. Be selective in what experiences you include in your resume, experiences that have really shaped you, and quality is much more important than quantity when it comes to extracurricular activities in the resume portion. When you're writing, be honest and use your own voice. Please put the thesaurus down. Using those $1,000,000 words really stand out in an essay in terms of word choice. When I'm reading a college essay, I get a sense of your style, a sense of your diction, and all of a sudden there's a word that really stands out that doesn't fit. It's maybe distracting from the application. Think about your own fit. Do research in the universities, choose universities that are right for you and that are not just based on reputation alone. And be honest with yourself. Take some time for authentic self-reflection to really understand your strengths, your weaknesses. And sometimes this means, really talking with folks. Utilize your resources, counselors, teachers, admissions representatives like myself, parents, folks with the Strivers Network to really understand, okay, this is going to be a school that I'm really reaching for. This is a school that I should gain admissions for. And this is maybe kind of a backup plan. That's commonly how you see universities and students grouping them to best approach their own list of schools. And you have to be truthful with yourself to build that list. And so what are universities looking for in this process? In the context of institutional priorities, again, there's that word, institutional priorities that we as the University of Rochester, that we want to meet in terms of building a class. Universities are looking for fit, academic preparation, intellectual curiosity, and institutional familiarity. Unfortunately, there really isn't any simple formula. U.S. holistic admissions is not like the UK's UCAS system or a system like IIT's, the joint entrance exam in India, where these exams, these systems have a real singular determination in terms of how we admit students. We look at each student with a new lens within a new context. After all, students are coming from many, many different contexts internationally. And all those students are going to be bringing a different set of circumstances that cannot be compared, like to like. And so, especially as an international student, holistic review can really work in your favor. Furthermore, kind of to bring this point home, one of the more common questions as admissions officers you receive is kind of the student A versus student B question, where one candidate presents these credentials and another candidate presents these credentials, and you can only take one of those candidates, and who do you admit? But in reality, university admissions officers don't operate that way. Again, each applicant is reviewed within a context of your own personal and curricular circumstances, as well as within the university's broader goals. It's not against another student. So that's kind of, generally speaking, how that process would work. Other things that will be examined as part of this process, some universities are going to be putting academics first and then look at other additional aspects, institutional priorities. Again, you can't really second guess how the university is going to review your application. You kind of just need to be your authentic self. Other factors that universities will consider, application volume for a particular major. Ultimately, the number of seats are certainly going to matter and will drive selectivity or competitiveness for a particular school or program. An applicant's financial capabilities. This is also something that may matter for the school you are applying to. Universities that are need blind versus need aware. Just to define those terms. So a need blind admissions is a term used in the United States here that denotes a university admissions policy in which an institution does not consider an applicant's financial situation when making a decision. So need aware is the opposite, where as an admissions officer, I would consider a student's ability to afford the education at X university when making an admissions decision. And this is really important. If a school, the university states that they will meet 100% of a student's financial need, but have a set scholarship budget, how are they going to approach distributing that scholarship budget? Are they going to admit a few students that have a high need in terms of the money they need to support themselves? Or will they admit many students that have low financial need? And how institutions approach this question depends on capabilities and their priorities, but as a factor that is important to some admissions decisions. Of course, understanding how the review process works at a particular institution. Every university or college has a different review procedure in terms of who reads your app and when. And of course, this can have an effect on how that application is read. And community fit, of course, is important. I mentioned that quite a bit in our conversation, determining your ability to be successful. And ultimately, it's what we're looking for when we look to admit a student is your ability to be successful. And again, reach out to your university. We want you to thrive as an international student and not just survive. This is what we're here for. So then just bringing in some context to the University of Rochester and how we as an institution practice holistic admissions. Firstly, we examine your academic profile for academic fit, making sure that you can handle the class workload, primarily looking at your transcript, both internal, external, board results, not just a GPA again, but actual courses that you're taking and challenging yourself. Is the coursework relevant to what you want to study? And you can see here, even within the context of holistic review, academic ability doesn't just mean one single result or meeting a minimum baseline. In fact, another common question that we receive is, what are the minimum requirements that I need to be admitted to a university? And the fact is, many U.S. institutions are reluctant to talk about minimum requirements because it doesn't really fit into the model of an application that's holistically reviewed. So we will more commonly answer those questions in quoting median ranges. So the average SAT score is this, or the average GPA score is this, because again, in a holistically reviewed application, you're not looking to meet minimum benchmarks because there are no minimum benchmarks. In evaluating all of this criteria, there are many different aspects of a review that are important. And how this review happens is across multiple levels. Firstly, with the international admissions team, and then by a committee to make sure our decisions are really in line with institutional priorities. So this is how we, as an office at the University of Rochester, would review your application. So again, with the goal of building context across a variety of markers and metrics, this is really crucial to what we do. Our admissions office here at the University of Rochester has something like 50 different priorities that we're looking for to meet when we're building a first year class. Everything that looks at, looking at academics, of course, but demographic factors, socioeconomic factors, geographic factors, bringing students in for different academic programs. All of these factors are things that we are examining and looking at when we build our first year class. And so another aspect of the application process here at Rochester is, we do meet financial need of our applicants. And so we are need aware in our admissions process. So that means, again, we're one of these institutions that we do award financial aid to students, international applicants, but we have a set scholarship budget. And so how are we going to best award that financial aid to meet our institutional priorities? And so again, lastly here, we're trying to identify not only students that have had success, but those who can demonstrate the ability to have success in the future within the style of how we at Rochester approach higher education. So that's kind of what I have to talk about in terms of holistic admissions. But what I would like to do as well is talk a little bit about the University of Rochester in general and just present kind of a brief introduction to the University of Rochester as an institution. So the University of Rochester, we are a Research One institution. We are a comprehensive Research One institution, meaning that we have 80 plus different academic programs. And in terms of Research One, we are not only really interested in knowledge dissemination through teaching, of course, but also through creating knowledge through research. And so that's a big part of what we do here at the University of Rochester. And in terms of our size and how that's important relative to research, we are one of the smaller Research One institutions in the United States. We have about 5,500 undergraduates and about 5,500 graduate students here at the University of Rochester. So we're still meeting all the benchmarks that a Research One institution needs to meet here at Rochester, but we're spending those dollars, the same amount of dollars at a huge institution like Ohio State or Penn State would be for the UC system in California. The same dollars are being spent, but we're doing that across a smaller number of students. So there's just greater opportunities for our students to pursue research opportunities here. We are very much that quintessential American university residential campus community here in the heart of upstate New York. We're about 6-hour drive away from New York City, about an hour drive north as well by plane. So great proximity to major metropolitan areas. But the city of Rochester itself, we have a metro population of about 1 million people. So it's a solidly mid-sized city, certainly small enough to present large enough to present many different opportunities outside of the classroom, engagement with the community, but small enough that you're really going to get a sense of the community as well. You're not going to be overwhelmed by the city of Rochester. And so it's a really incredible environment to pursue higher education, to study. As someone who is from Rochester, I'm really proud of the fact that we have this really fantastic rigorous curriculum here at the University of Rochester. It's a place in which we practice open curriculum. And so when you apply to the University of Rochester, even though you're applying, you're essentially applying with intended majors, you're actually going to enter the University of Rochester as an undeclared student. And that's going to give you maximum flexibility to not be siloed into a particular program or school of thought. It's going to allow you to experience the breadth and depth of those 80 majors that we have here for undergraduate students. And that's important. If you're going to be going into mechanical engineering, for example, and you're going to be designing and building automobiles, you're going to need to know some physics, you're going to need to know some calculus, especially if you're designing the car I'm driving, but you're also going to need to know how to work on a team. You're going to need to know how to communicate effectively. And chances are you're not going to be gaining those skills in a calculus class. You're going to be gaining those skills in a history course or an English course. And so we want students as much as possible to get out of that silo, to experience a broader range of academic background, which is only going to increase your marketability and your ability to have success after you graduate. And in conjunction with those academic experiences, I mentioned research is a big part of what we do here. Other out-of-classroom experiences that are really helpful and important in terms of building that resume, building that network of individuals is, of course, internships. We have incredible internship opportunities here at the University of Rochester. Over 95% of our students here at Rochester will pursue some type of internship and building that resume and that connection that you'll have as an undergraduate student. So some real fantastic opportunities in that regard. In terms of applying to the University of Rochester, I hopefully I brought some context in the conversation in terms of how you'll apply to the University of Rochester in holistic admissions. We utilize the common application, coalition application. We have early decision deadlines, regular decision deadlines, and we are a test optional institution. So you don't need to submit the SAT or the ACT to be eligible for admissions here at the University of Rochester. Something, again, important to consider, especially the conversation that we just had relative to holistic admissions process here at the University of Rochester. One last thing of note, I'll talk about just the student life here on campus. Again, we are very much that quintessential residential American University campus. Beautiful location here, just south of downtown Rochester, and we are an incredibly diverse community. 30% of our undergraduate students are international students. We have student representation from all 50 states. So we are diverse in the broadest sense, socioeconomically, geographically, culturally, and students will choose the University of Rochester to take advantage of some of these engagement opportunities that we have with people that come from very diverse backgrounds, which is a really unique experience that students have here at the University of Rochester and during their university years. Study abroad is also really popular here at the University of Rochester. We have 40 plus different programs worldwide in which students can participate in study abroad as well. And nowhere more is that diversity felt than in the 300 plus clubs, organizations, opportunities for community engagement, civic engagement, club sports, intramurals, Greek life, all of these different ways in which students can engage. So that's a little summary of the University of Rochester. I'm happy that folks had an opportunity to engage and listen to the conversation today about holistic admissions and the context within the University of Rochester, and just a little bit more about the University of Rochester. But I'm happy at this point. We have about 10 or 15 minutes. If anybody has any additional questions that I can answer, we can feel free to take those in the chat, or I can look at some of the questions that were sent ahead of time as well. So here's a question that has to do with submissions of a portfolio. So I would say, relative to portfolios or non-traditional documents that have to do with the application process here at the University of Rochester, they're not really encouraged. If you're submitting a portfolio that demonstrates your artistic talent or your engagement with the arts, it's not something that's going to be applicable to an academic application, because after all, I'm not an art critic. I'm not going to necessarily know how to take that within context, besides to know that you're interested in art. And so we at the University of Rochester, we discourage the submission of art portfolios for academic programs. It's just not necessary and not part of the process. It's not going to give us any information that will be relevant to academic admissions. In terms of supplemental essays, there's a question about supplemental essays that are part of the common application or the coalition application. And so in addition to that main application that you submit, the universities that you apply to may ask for an additional application that will ask you to address questions that are specific to the university you are applying to. Here at the University of Rochester, we have a supplemental application that will ask you, hey, are you applying early decision? Are you applying regular decision? What are your top 2 intended majors? Are you interested in any of our combined degree programs? And then there'll be 2 short answer questions, like paragraph length questions, that have to do specifically with your interest in the University of Rochester. So that's a part of your essays, the total essays that you write, that will really deal with your familiarity with a particular institution. And again, as part of holistic admissions, that's really important. And so in terms of approaching supplemental essays, you want to do your research of the schools that you're applying to. So you have some things to talk about in those supplemental essays. Here's a good question that relates specifically to Sri Lankan A-levels. So I'm sure many students may be taking part in that curriculum. So typically how it works with, A-levels or, curriculums that are based off of the Cambridge model, where students may pursue like something like the IGCSEs or GCSEs, or what used to be called O-levels. So you'll have those in grade 10, grade 11, you'll finish your O-levels. and then you'll take on, 2 years of your A levels. And so we would obviously want to see all official results of your GCSEs, your IGCSEs, whatever you completed at the conclusion of grade 11. And then we would want to see, internal transcripts as it relates to the high school that you completed. So if your high school does have an internal transcript, a grade 10 transcript, please submit that along as well. And then a great same thing can be said for grade 11, with official results coming in grade 10. And then for your last year of high school, the year that you're completing the A levels, obviously by the time you're submitting applications, you may obviously or not have taken those exams yet. And so some institutions will provide predicted scores for A level results or mid-year grades as it relates. So that's how that would work in that process. We would look to predicted scores or your mid-year grades to give us a sense of where you currently stand in your last year of high school and your academic ability. And then here's a question that I had about the Take 5 program and some of the other combined degree programs that we have here at the University of Rochester. So Take 5 is a really unique program that we have here at Rochester that enables tuition-free 5th years. So essentially, bachelor degrees in the United States will take 4 years to complete, 120 credits typically to complete a bachelor's degree. And so you do that across 8 semesters, 4 years of study at a U.S. institution. Now, the Take 5 program here at the University of Rochester enables students to pursue a 5th year of university life, university study, without paying tuition. So, for example, maybe you're very involved in your astronomy and physics major in your 4 years here at the University of Rochester. You're doing a lot of research, taking a lot of courses inside of astronomy and physics, and you just didn't have an opportunity to pursue your interests of, I don't know, maybe English literature. And so a Take 5 program would allow you for free, no tuition free, to pursue an additional year of study where you could take on an additional academic interest. In this case, it might be English literature. And so it's a really cool way in which you can extend that study and add further understanding of the breadth of academics that we have here at Rochester. And that would allow you to be very marketable, take on research, all those different things that would come with all the university resources that you would have access to. So there's a question here of beer. So we have some really unique combined degree programs here at Rochester. So these would be combined bachelor's and master's degrees that you would complete in 5 years. We have them in education, that is our grade program. We have them in public health and epidemiology, that's our field program. And then our year program, which is our graduate engineering at Rochester program. So essentially, you'll complete a bachelor's in engineering and a master's in engineering in 5 years. And you can apply to that program as a first-year student. So it allows you to kind of fast-track that experience to graduate level work in engineering as a peer student. You can very much do that with let's see what else I have here. What types of things are important to mention in letters of recommendation? So this is, that's what your teachers say in letters of recommendation are confidential. So you're not necessarily going to know what they talk about, but typical things would be, statements that are going to, like I said, statements that will back up the picture you are painting in your application. So letters that will attest to your academic ability, your good character, your community service, all of these types of things, bringing context to your situation. That's going to be what we're looking for inside of the recommendation letter. So all the questions that I had sent to me ahead of time. Thorandi, are you seeing any questions that have popped up on YouTube or anywhere else that I can help answer?
Yeah, actually, there's a question that just came in. I'm so sorry, my camera isn't working for some
No
reason. But
problem.
yeah, so we just got a question. I think this applies to lots of Sri Lankan students because, especially with COVID and then the economic crisis coming directly afterwards, there were a lot of
Absolutely.
delays in, in school and exams and things like that. And also, students just generally had a very hard time with,
Absolutely.
yeah, studies. So I think a concern that many people have is if they have low grades for their school term tests, like their end of term exams, or if, for example, these grades are delayed and certain grades are missing, but their final grades for ordinary level and advanced level exams are good, would that be a problem? Like that the end of term exam grades are not as good.
So it's a situation that actually is maybe more common than folks might think, that there may be a discrepancy between students' results on like board examinations, like your A levels, and maybe your internal transcripts, right? Your internal end of term marks, maybe there may be those may be lower than what you're getting on these exams. And we understand the context of that and the different reasons why that may happen. A lot of it has to do with just educational culture in a particular region, uh, grading, harsher grading on internal mark sheets that helps motivate students, motivational grading, but also in terms of just, the context within Sri Lanka and the troubles that have happened there over the last few years relative. That's going to be context that we're aware of and is something that we're going to be taking into consideration when students apply. And so that's, again, that's why holistic admissions is really important, because we allow that level of context to be a factor in our admissions decisions.
All right, I think that'll be very encouraging for most of us scholars to hear. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. Any other questions I can help out with today? Was I'm really happy to share this knowledge with you all. So
Yeah, y'all can feel free to unmute and ask questions, or you can keep them coming in the chat.
again, the biggest piece of advice that I can leave with students here today is just, reach out to your admissions officers, whether you're interested in Rochester or Cornell or Berkeley or, a smaller school or anything that, there's admissions officers for all of these institutions, and our job really is to be that go-between to help you understand the process. And again, we're all going to be asking for this information, all these application elements, but we're going to look at them a little bit differently. So reach out to us, take part in these types of these sessions. This understanding hopefully is really going to bring context into how you build your application.
We've just got one more question, which is
Sure.
about it's about Rochester specifically. It's more about the student life aspect. So the question is, how many clubs and societies do students usually enroll in on average, and what kind of clubs and societies does Rochester have?
Yeah, so as I was saying in our conversation about Rochester specifically, we're a very diverse institution, and that diversity is really felt in the number of organizations and clubs we have on campus. We have 300 plus different clubs and organizations. So chances are there are going to be some other folks here on campus that are going to be interested in the same thing you are. I have a colleague of mine that likes to joke that if you're bored here at Rochester, fortunately, you're just a boring student. There's too much going on to not find your crew, to not find your niche of other people to have some fun outside of the classroom. That's a big part of the experience at a US university. And so relative to kind of the number of clubs students are engaged with, it really, really varies. It varies depending on a student's academic course load, their academic schedule, what they're interested in, how much they want to engage with the student community. But there is a phrase here at the university that's so Rochester, meaning that students are engaged across a very broad range of different things. And we have a student in physics that's writing for the university newspaper, that also, plays an instrument, You have, maybe gamers that are also playing football or soccer. And so there's, students bring this wide variety of engagement to University of Rochester, and that's so Rochester.
That is amazing to hear. Um, yeah, I mean, I think our scholars are also very interested in student life and just getting into as many different things as possible. So I'm sure
Of
that'll be great
course.
news for them. All right, I
Well,
think that's all the questions that we have for today. So in that case, maybe yeah, if we have any more questions coming in after this, I might if you come up with any other questions, please just mail them to us, the team, and we can direct them to Mr. Bond, perhaps. Anyway, thanks so much, Mr. Bond, for taking the time and honestly giving us this very, very detailed explanation of the holistic admissions process, which is something we really appreciate because it's something we're quite new to. And thank you so much for giving us such a vibrant introduction to Uni of Rochester as well. And it honestly sounds like a super exciting place to be at. So thanks so much once again for taking the time to talk to our scholars today. And thank you to everyone who attended and everyone who watched the live stream as well.
yeah, thank you for having me, and everyone have a great evening. Bye bye.